Captain Sarah Reynolds stood at her station in the Lunar Defense Command, watching the deep space monitors with practiced vigilance. The coffee in her mug had long since gone cold, forgotten during her 12-hour shift of watching nothing happen. That's why she almost missed it. The subtle distortion in the sensor readings that looked more like a software glitch than a threat. "Control, I'm seeing some unusual gravitational fluctuations in Sector 7, she reported, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. The anomaly wasn't like anything she'd seen in her 15 years of space monitoring duty. It moved like water, flowing through the vacuum of space, as if the laws of physics were mere suggestions. The response from Control never came. Instead, a low, almost subsonic hum began to emanate from the station's walls. Sarah's coffee mug vibrated across her console, leaving a trail of brown rings before shattering on the floor. The sound wasn't just noise. It felt alive, threading its way through her consciousness like invisible fingers. Emergency protocols. She managed to shout before the frequency shifted, and half her crew collapsed, clutching their heads in agony. The other half stood frozen, their eyes wide with terror as their minds processed horrors that existed only in their perception. Through the reinforced windows of the command center, Sarah watched as the darkness of space rippled. Massive shapes emerged, their surfaces seeming to absorb both light and sound. The Vox 3 ships, though no one knew their name yet, moved with organic grace. They weren't constructed. They were grown, living vessels that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. Sarah fought against the invasive frequencies, her military training warring with the primal fear being pumped directly into her brain. She managed to reach the emergency broadcast system, her fingers trembling as she input the codes that would alert Earth's defense forces. The message was simple. They're here. They're in our heads. God help us all. The response from Earth's military was swift but ultimately futile. Missile batteries launched their payloads skyward, only to watch them pass harmlessly through what appeared to be solid alien hull. Fighter squadrons scrambled worldwide, their pilots lasting mere minutes before the sound drove them to panic or unconsciousness. The Vox 3 ships didn't even bother to destroy them. They simply continued their silent advance, while the fighters spiraled groundward, their pilots lost in symphonies of terror. In New York, the first civilian casualties began. Times Square fell silent as the dreaded frequency swept through the city. Millions of minds buckled under the alien assault. Some people fled in blind panic, while others stood motionless, trapped in personal hells of their own perception. The same scene played out in London, Tokyo, Moscow, every major city worldwide, experiencing the same silent apocalypse. The Vox 3 ships, now numbering in the hundreds, took up positions in low Earth orbit. Their bioorganic forms created patterns in the sky that seemed to shift and change when no one was looking directly at them. They didn't communicate, didn't make demands. They simply broadcast their psychic symphony, methodically dismantling human civilization through fear alone. Military leaders quickly discovered that electronic communications were being affected by the alien presence. Radio signals became corrupted with the same consciousness-altering frequencies. The internet fragmented as server networks crashed under waves of fear-induced chaos. Humanity was being systematically isolated, divided, and conquered without a single conventional weapon being fired. In the Lunar Defense Command, Sarah Reynolds remained at her post, blood trickling from her nose as she fought against the alien influence. She discovered that humming certain frequencies helped, not much, but enough to maintain some clarity. Through tear-blurred eyes, she documented everything she could about the invaders. Their ships' movements, their attack patterns, the specific frequencies that seemed to cause the most damage to human consciousness. Her last log entry, transmitted through increasingly unreliable channels to Earth's scattered military command, contained an observation that would later prove crucial. The sound, it's not random. There's a pattern. Like they're not just attacking. They're speaking. God help us, they're speaking. Then the Lunar Defense Command went dark, along with humanity's hopes of mounting an effective first response to the invasion. The age of silence had begun, and no one could hear humanity's screams. Dr. Amanda Sullivan hunched over her makeshift workstation in the Pentagon's basement level B3, surrounded by the soft green glow of oscilloscope displays. While the world above descended into chaos, she remained fixated on the wavelength patterns scrolling across her screens. 3 weeks into the invasion, and she was running on nothing but military-grade caffeine tablets and the gnawing certainty that she was missing something obvious. "Doctor, we need to evacuate," Lieutenant Rodriguez called from the doorway. "The frequency attacks are getting stronger. Half the building is already compromised." The young officer's nose was bleeding, a common sign of prolonged exposure to the alien signals. 5 more minutes, Amanda muttered, not looking up from her work. She'd noticed something in the latest recordings from the fallen Lunar Defense Command. The alien frequencies weren't constant. They shifted in regular patterns, like a distant explosion rocked the building, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. But Amanda barely noticed. Her hands flew across the keyboard, overlaying the alien signal patterns with Earth's natural frequencies. Ocean currents, whale songs, seismic vibrations. She pulled up every natural acoustic pattern she could find. "Dr. Sullivan," Rodriguez shouted, more urgently this time. "My God," Amanda whispered, staring at her screen. "They're not just attacking us. They're singing." She pointed to the display, where the alien frequency patterns now aligned perfectly with deep ocean whale communications. "Look at this harmonic structure. It's almost identical to how sperm whales communicate across entire oceans." Another explosion, closer this time. Rodriguez drew his sidearm, checking the corridor. "That's fascinating, Doctor, but we need to move. Now." Amanda grabbed her external drives and stuffed them into her bag, along with Sarah Reynolds' final transmissions from the moon. "Don't you see? This changes everything. They're not just broadcasting terror, they're communicating, coordinating. These patterns, they're too complex to be just a weapon." They rushed through the darkened corridors, passing abandoned offices where papers still fluttered from desk fans running on emergency power. Above them, the alien frequency grew stronger, a pressure behind the eyes that made thinking increasingly difficult. In the underground parking garage, Amanda's modified Humvee waited. She'd lined the interior with experimental acoustic dampening materials, not enough to block the alien signals completely, but sufficient to keep her mind clear enough to work. "Where are we going?" Rodriguez asked as they sped up the exit ramp. "Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution," Amanda replied, swerving around abandoned vehicles. "If I'm right about these patterns, we need their deep-sea acoustic research equipment and their cetacean communication databases." The drive through Washington, D.C. was a journey through apocalyptic devastation, not physical destruction. The aliens hadn't needed to fire a single conventional weapon. Instead, they saw the results of mass panic. Crashed cars, abandoned buildings, and everywhere, people wandering in dazed confusion or huddled in catatonic terror. Amanda's modified radio crackled to life. She designed it to filter out most of the alien frequencies. Through the static, she heard scattered military communications. The Chinese fleet was gone, their crews having turned their weapons on each other in alien-induced panic. European air defenses were blind, their radar systems corrupted by the strange signals. And somewhere in the Indian Ocean, an entire carrier group had vanished without a trace. "The pattern's evolving," Amanda noted, glancing at her dashboard instruments. "Every hour, the frequencies shift slightly. They're learning, adapting to our brainwave patterns." She turned to Rodriguez, who was fighting to stay conscious despite the protection of the vehicle. "But that means we can learn too, if we can understand their language." Her voice trailed off as they crested a hill overlooking the Potomac. One of the alien vessels hummed low over the river, its bioorganic surface rippling like dark mercury. The patterns across its hull matched the frequency waves on Amanda's instruments perfectly. They're not ships, she realized, her hands tightening on the steering wheel. They're instruments. The invasion isn't an invasion. It's a performance. And Earth is their concert hall. As they sped towards Massachusetts, Amanda's mind raced with possibilities. If the Vox 3 were using sound as both weapon and communication, then understanding their patterns wasn't just about defense. It was about finding a way to talk back. And perhaps, hidden in the deep ocean recordings at Woods Hole, she would find the key to humanity's survival in the songs of Earth's own giants. Jamie Torres sat in his darkened recording studio in Seattle, watching patterns dance across his sound visualization software. While others fled the cities in panic, he remained, fascinated by the alien frequencies that everyone else found unbearable. To him, they weren't just sound. They were visible, tangible things, like ribbons of light that he could almost reach out and touch. They're building something, he mumbled to himself, adjusting his custom-built frequency analyzer. His fingers moved across the equipment with practiced precision, fine-tuning the incoming signals. Where others heard mind-shattering noise, Jamie saw structure, mathematics, beauty. His phone buzzed, one of the few still working thanks to his modified signal dampeners. The caller ID showed Dr. Marcus Webb from the Institute for Neurodivergent Research. Jamie, are you still monitoring the frequencies? Dr. Webb's voice crackled through the static. They're creating a lattice, Jamie replied, his eyes fixed on the screen. The patterns interweave, like a spider web made of symphony pieces. I can see where they connect. You're the third one today, Webb said excitedly. We're getting reports from across the country. People on the spectrum, synesthetes, individuals with auditory processing differences. They're all experiencing the alien signals differently. Some can even predict the pattern shifts before they happen. Jamie's hands flew across his keyboard, making notes. He'd noticed the shifts too. Subtle changes in the frequency patterns that came in regular intervals. They're not random. These changes, they're like movements in a piece of music. Each one builds on the last. A commotion outside drew his attention to the window. Through the rain-streaked glass, he watched as a group of people wandered down the street, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. The alien frequencies were strongest at night, turning most neurotypical humans into shambling sleepwalkers. We're organizing, Webb continued, creating a network. There's a research facility in Woods Hole. A Dr. Sullivan is working on understanding the alien communications. She needs people who can perceive the patterns clearly. Jamie hesitated. His studio was safe, familiar. The thought of traveling across the country through alien-induced chaos made his chest tight with anxiety. But the patterns on his screen seemed to call to him, promising answers if he could just understand them fully. I've got something they need to see, he decided. The frequencies, they're not just communication. They're building something in our minds. Like they're trying to reshape human consciousness itself. How soon can you get to Massachusetts? Jamie looked at his emergency bag. Always packed, always ready. Being autistic had taught him to prepare for sudden changes. I'll need help. The roads. Already arranged. There's a military convoy leaving from Boeing Field in 3 hours. They're collecting others like you from across the country. People who can still function under the alien signals. As if to emphasize the point, another wave of alien frequencies washed over the city. Car alarms blared in the distance, then fell silent. But while the sound made Jamie's skin tingle, his mind remained clear, able to process and analyze the complex patterns others found devastating. He quickly began backing up his analysis data. The patterns he'd recorded showed something remarkable. The aliens weren't just broadcasting terror. They were trying to impose their own form of consciousness on humanity. A unified, singular way of thinking that left no room for variation or divergence. The greatest mistake they made, Jamie muttered as he worked, was assuming all human minds worked the same way. He packed his specialized equipment, each piece carefully wrapped and stored according to his precise organizational system. Outside, the alien ships pulsed with their deadly symphony, their bioorganic forms casting strange shadows through the clouds. As he made his final preparations, Jamie's phone lit up with notifications. Similar reports were coming in from around the world. A teenage girl with synesthesia in Tokyo who could predict the frequency shifts. A nonverbal autistic mathematician in Mumbai who'd mapped the alien patterns to complex fractal equations. A sound engineer with ADHD in Berlin who'd found ways to disrupt the signals locally. The very people whose minds society had often dismissed as different were becoming humanity's greatest hope. The aliens had built their weapon assuming a standardized human consciousness. They never considered that Earth's greatest strength might be the beautiful chaos of neurodiversity. Jamie shouldered his bag and stepped out into the altered world. Above him, the alien vessels continued their haunting performance, unaware that their audience was about to become the resistance they never expected. The basement laboratory at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution hummed with activity. Dr. Amanda Sullivan stood before a wall of monitors, each displaying different aspects of the alien frequency patterns. Behind her, Jamie Torres sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by his own specialized equipment. "There," Jamie said, pointing to a complex waveform. "The pattern shifts every 6.28 hours, almost exactly 2 pi. His fingers danced across his tablet, manipulating the visualization. "But look at what happens when I overlay the brainwave patterns from our volunteers." Amanda leaned closer, her exhausted eyes widening. The neural patterns from their neurodivergent volunteers created interference patterns in the alien frequencies, subtle disruptions that seemed to ripple through the entire signal structure. "It's like dropping a pebble in their pond," she muttered. "Each unique brainwave pattern creates its own disruption. But we'd need something stronger, more coordinated to make a real impact." The room was crowded with an unlikely assembly of humanity's last hope. Dr. Webb coordinated with other neurodivergent individuals who had been brought in from around the world. Each person perceived the alien signals differently. Some saw colors, others felt textures, and a few could predict the changes before they occurred. "We need to combine them," Jamie said suddenly, jumping up. "Not just analyze the patterns, merge them. Create a counter-frequency using our combined neural signatures." His hands moved excitedly as he spoke, his mind racing ahead of his words. Amanda frowned. The power requirements would be enormous, and the risk to the volunteers. She glanced at the medical readouts from their previous experiments. Even brief exposure to the modified frequencies had caused nosebleeds and migraines. "We're running out of time," Lieutenant Rodriguez interrupted, entering the lab with fresh satellite imagery. "The Vox-3 ships are changing formation. Whatever they're building in our atmosphere, it's nearly complete." Jamie walked to the central holographic display, where the alien frequency patterns twisted like living things. "What if we use the ocean?" he asked. "Their signals match deep-sea acoustic patterns. We could use the existing underwater channel to amplify our broadcast." Dr. Webb looked up from his coordination station. "The SOFAR channel, the same one whales use for long-distance communication." "Exactly," Amanda said, catching Jamie's train of thought. "We already have the deep-water acoustic network in place. We could modify it to broadcast our counter-frequency worldwide." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. Jamie worked with the other neurodivergent volunteers, each contributing their unique perception of the alien patterns. Amanda and her team modified the deep-sea acoustic transmitters, preparing them for a broadcast that would either save humanity or fry the brains of everyone involved. "The patterns are converging," Jamie announced, his voice tense. On his screens, the alien frequencies were shifting, becoming more concentrated. "Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon." Amanda made the final connections to their makeshift broadcasting array. They had repurposed everything they could find: acoustic research equipment, military sonar systems, even modified whale tracking devices, all linked to a central system that would channel the combined neural patterns of their volunteers. "Everyone ready?" she asked, looking around the room. 23 neurodivergent individuals sat in specially designed interface chairs, each connected to the broadcast system. Jamie took his position at the central station. "Remember," Dr. Webb cautioned, "if anyone experiences severe discomfort, signal immediately. We'll shut it down." Jamie closed his eyes, letting his mind sink into the patterns he'd been studying for weeks. Around him, the other volunteers did the same, each perceiving and interpreting the alien frequencies in their own unique way. Amanda's hand hovered over the activation switch. Above them, through the reinforced ceiling, the Vox 3 ships pulsed with increasing intensity. Their symphony of control was reaching its crescendo. "Now or never," Jamie whispered. Amanda threw the switch. 23 unique human consciousness patterns merged into a single broadcast, amplified through the world's oceans. A counter-melody to the alien symphony, carried through the same deep-sea channels that Earth's whales had used for millions of years. The response was immediate. The alien frequencies faltered, their perfect patterns disrupted by the chaotic beauty of human neurodiversity. And in orbit, the Vox 3 ships began to shudder. The world's oceans trembled with human defiance. From the deep-water broadcast arrays, waves of counter-frequencies rippled outward, carrying the combined consciousness patterns of 23 unique minds. In the Woods Hole Command Center, Jamie Torres watched through sweat-streaked eyes as their signal spread across the global monitoring network. Pattern holding steady, he managed through gritted teeth. Blood trickled from his nose, but he remained focused on the displays. Each volunteer's neural signature showed as a different color in the composite broadcast, a rainbow of human cognitive diversity fighting back against the alien monotone. Dr. Amanda Sullivan worked frantically at her station, adjusting the broadcast parameters. "The SOFAR channel is amplifying our signal better than expected. We're seeing disruption effects as far as the Indian Ocean." Above them, the Vox 3 ships writhed in the atmosphere. Their bioorganic hulls pulsed with chaotic lights, no longer synchronized in their deadly symphony. Through the command center's reinforced windows, they could see the nearest vessel twisting like a wounded serpent. Incoming from Pacific Command, Lieutenant Rodriguez called out, "The alien signals are weakening over major population centers. People are starting to wake up." But victory came with a price. In their interface chairs, the volunteers struggled against the mental strain. A young woman from Tokyo began seizing, her unique ability to see sound patterns overwhelming her consciousness. Dr. Webb rushed to disconnect her before permanent damage could occur. "We need to increase power," Jamie insisted, his hands flying across his controls. "They're trying to adapt, changing their frequency patterns to resist our interference." On his screens, the alien signals were shifting, becoming more complex. Amanda shook her head. "The volunteers can't take much more. We're already pushing the human brain beyond its designed limits." "Wait," Jamie said suddenly, studying a new pattern emerging in the chaos. "Look at this. The Vox 3 ships. They're not just being disrupted. They're resonating. Like they're trying to match our frequency." Through the windows, the alien vessels had begun moving in new patterns. Gone was their perfect geometric formation. Instead, they swayed and twisted, their movements almost organic, almost desperate. "Multiple contacts dropping from orbit," Rodriguez reported. "Smaller vessels are falling back. The larger ships are." He paused, checking his readings. "They're descending, making planetfall over major cities." Amanda rushed to the main display. "They're not retreating. This is something else. Jamie, look at these harmonic patterns." Jamie studied the new data, his unique perception allowing him to see what others might miss. The counter-frequency isn't just disrupting their control signal. It's forcing them to adapt, to change their own consciousness to match ours. In their interface chairs, the remaining volunteers began reporting new sensations. A mathematician from Mumbai described feeling alien thoughts bleeding through the connection. A sound engineer from Berlin claimed he could sense confusion and fear from the Vox 3 vessels. "We need to push harder," Jamie decided, reaching for his own interface controls. One final broadcast at maximum power. Not just disruption. Communication. Janie? No. Amanda moved to stop him. The neural load could kill you. But Jamie was already connecting himself to the broadcast array. Their consciousness is structured around perfect unity, perfect harmony. We need to show them something different, something beautifully chaotic. Before anyone could stop him, he initiated the enhanced broadcast. Jamie's unique neural patterns, shaped by years of processing sound and pattern differently, flooded into the global network. The other volunteers gasped as his consciousness merged with theirs, creating a symphony of human cognitive diversity. Through the windows, the nearest Vox 3 ship shuddered violently. Its surface rippled with waves of bioluminescence, patterns shifting from ordered geometry to chaotic swirls. And then, for the first time since their arrival, the aliens began to communicate. Not with sound, not with terror, but with something else. Something that only Jamie and the other volunteers could perceive. Through their neural interface, they felt the first stirrings of individual thought awakening in the collective alien consciousness. The Vox 3 weren't just being defeated. They were being transformed. In the aftermath of Jamie's enhanced broadcast, chaos erupted across Earth's skies. The massive Vox 3 vessels, once synchronized in their terrible purpose, now moved with erratic independence. Their bioorganic surfaces flashed with conflicting patterns, like neural networks having seizures. His vital signs are critical, Dr. Webb shouted, hovering over Jamie's unconscious form. The young sound engineer lay motionless in his interface chair, blood streaming from his ears and nose. We need to disconnect him. Wait, Amanda ordered, studying the readings from the alien ships. Something's happening. The Vox 3 collective consciousness. It's fragmenting, breaking into individual patterns. Through the neural interface network, the other volunteers reported a cascade of alien emotions. Fear, confusion, anger, and something else. A sensation of awakening, of boundaries dissolving and reforming. The perfect harmony of the hive mind was shattering into billions of distinct voices. Multiple vessels showing signs of internal conflict, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported from his station. They're fighting each other. Some are trying to maintain the collective signal, while others are actively disrupting it. On the main display, the alien frequency patterns had become a chaos of competing wavelengths. The single overwhelming symphony had broken into countless smaller melodies, each unique, each struggling to express itself for the first time. A massive Vox 3 ship suddenly descended through the clouds above Woods Hole, its surface rippling with patterns that matched Jamie's brainwaves. Unlike the others, this vessel moved with purpose, positioning itself directly above the research facility. They're trying to communicate, one of the Mumbai volunteers announced, her eyes wide behind her interface visor. Not with sound anymore, with pure consciousness. They're scared, lost. Like children waking up alone. Amanda made a decision. Patch me into the broadcast network. If they're reaching out, they deserve an answer. She settled into an empty interface chair, ignoring Dr. Webb's protests about neural damage risks. The moment she connected, her mind exploded with alien sensation. She saw / felt / heard the truth of the Vox 3 existence, a species that had achieved perfect unity at the cost of individual thought. Their technology had evolved to link their consciousness, to eliminate the chaos of individual perception. But in doing so, they had lost something essential: the ability to grow, to change, to see the world through different eyes. They're not just an invasion force, Amanda gasped, gripping her chair's armrests. They're refugees from their own evolution, searching the galaxy for chaos, Jamie whispered, his eyes fluttering open. For the freedom of imperfection. His voice was weak, but his mind remained connected to the broadcast network, bridging the gap between human and alien consciousness. Above them, more Vox 3 ships descended, their surfaces now pulsing with distinct patterns, individual identities emerging from the collective. Through the neural interface, the volunteers could sense the alien struggle, Some embraced their newfound individuality with joy, while others fought desperately to maintain the hive mind's control. The collective is trying to reassert dominance, Rodriguez warned. Multiple ships in orbit are generating feedback loops, attempting to override the dissident frequencies. But it was too late. The seeds of individual consciousness had taken root in the Vox 3 collective. Ship by ship, mind by mind, they were discovering the power of unique perception. Their perfect formation had become a dance of individual expression. Through their shared neural connection, Jamie reached out to the nearest vessel. His consciousness, shaped by years of processing the world differently, showed them a new way of existing, one where diversity of thought wasn't a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be celebrated. They need our help, he said softly, to learn how to be individuals again, to understand that different isn't wrong, it's just different. As if in response, the Vox 3 ships began generating new frequency patterns, not the overwhelming symphony of control, but a harmony of distinct voices. The invasion had become a revolution, not of weapons or violence, but of consciousness itself. The age of silence was ending, replaced by a chorus of awakening minds. The Woods Hole facility had become an unlikely embassy for humanity's first true contact with the Vox 3. 3 days after the collective's fragmentation, a group of newly individualized aliens requested direct communication. Their massive vessel hovered above the building, its surface now displaying gentle, swirling patterns that mimicked the ocean's waves below. Jamie Torres stood in the hastily prepared meeting room, his neural interface modified to facilitate clearer communication. Dr. Amanda Sullivan and Lieutenant Rodriguez flanked him, while Dr. Webb monitored the vital signs of everyone present. None of them knew quite what to expect. "They're ready," Jamie announced, sensing the alien consciousness approaching through the neural link. They're nervous. They'd never experienced individual interaction before. The air in the room shimmered, and 3 Vox 3 emerged. Their physical forms were unlike anything humanity had imagined. Crystalline structures that seemed to flow like liquid mercury, each one now pulsing with its own unique frequency pattern. Gone was the perfect symmetry that had marked their species. Each being now displayed subtle variations in form and movement. "We bring understanding." The first alien communicated through the neural interface, its thoughts carrying traces of wonder and regret. "We bring truth of our wrong." Through the connection, images and sensations flooded into the human observers' minds. They saw the Vox 3 homeworld, a planet of living crystal where billions of individual minds once flourished. They witnessed the development of their consciousness-linking technology, created with the noble goal of ending conflict and fostering perfect understanding. "Our unity became prison," the second Vox 3 shared, its form rippling with emotion. Each generation, fewer remembered how to think alone, to dream alone, to be. The third alien moved forward, its surface displaying patterns remarkably similar to human neural activity. "Your chaos saved us. Your different minds showed us truth. Unity without sameness. Harmony without control." Amanda stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "Your invasion wasn't just about conquering us, was it? You were trying to save us from what you saw as the pain of individuality." "Yes," the first alien confirmed. "We believe single thoughts brought suffering. Difference brought conflict. We sought to give gift of unity. Its form dimmed with shame. We were wrong." Jamie's unique perception allowed him to see the complexity in their communications, layers of meaning that others might miss. "You're not just here to apologize. You need our help." The aliens' forms pulsed in agreement. Through the neural link, they shared their current crisis. Across Earth's orbit, thousands of Vox 3 were experiencing individual consciousness for the first time in countless generations. Some were embracing their newfound freedom, while others were terrified, desperate to reconnect with the hive mind. "Civil war threatens," the second alien communicated, "between those who choose freedom and those who fear it. We need teachers, guides to show path between total unity and complete separation." Dr. Webb stepped forward, his medical training giving him unique insight. You need our neurodivergent population, people who understand how to process the world differently while still being part of society. Yes, the third alien confirmed. Your minds. Different, but connected. Independent, but understanding. This is way forward. Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had remained skeptical, finally spoke. And what do we get in return? How do we know this isn't another trick? The Vox 3 moved in unison, their forms creating a harmonious display that remained distinctly individual. Through the neural interface, they shared their offer: technology to defend against future hive mind species, knowledge of consciousness-altering frequencies, and most importantly, a chance to forge an alliance based on the celebration of cognitive diversity. We offer partnership, they communicated, not in perfect unity, but in beautiful chaos of cooperation. Together, we protect Galaxy from forced conformity. Jamie smiled, feeling the genuine hope and fear in their thoughts. You're not just asking for help. You're offering to help us prepare for other threats out there. Other species who might try to enforce their version of unity. The aliens' forms brightened in agreement. The invasion that had threatened to end humanity had instead birthed something unprecedented. An alliance founded on the principle that diversity of thought was not just acceptable, but essential for the survival of any species. The age of forced silence was truly over. A new symphony was beginning, one composed of countless unique voices, human and alien alike. 1 year after the failed invasion, the Woods Hole facility had transformed into the Interspecies Consciousness Research Center. Jamie Torres stood at its heart, in a vast chamber where crystalline Vox 3 structures merged seamlessly with human technology. Through the reinforced windows, he could see their ships hovering peacefully above the Atlantic, their surfaces now displaying an ever-changing array of individual patterns. The neural integration is holding steady, Dr. Amanda Sullivan announced, monitoring the global network they'd created. We're seeing successful consciousness sharing across all 17 training centers. Around the world, similar facilities had been established, each hosting both species. The Vox 3 who chose independence worked alongside human neurodivergent volunteers, learning to balance individual thought with community connection. In return, they shared their advanced understanding of consciousness and perception. Latest report from the Lunar Defense Grid. Lieutenant Rodriguez, now Colonel, reported. The early warning system detected another hive mind probe at the edge of the solar system. The combined human Vox 3 frequency barrier turned it away without conflict. Jamie nodded, watching the consciousness patterns flow across his displays. The defense network they'd created utilized both species' strengths. Human cognitive diversity combined with Vox 3 consciousness linking technology. Any attempt to impose forced unity on Earth would now face an impenetrable barrier of chaotic, beautiful resistance. We're ready for the next phase, Dr. Webb said, entering with a group of new volunteers. The Vox 3 educational exchange program can begin. Through the neural interface, Jamie sensed excitement from their alien partners. The program would send human neurodivergent individuals to the restored Vox 3 homeworld, while bringing newly awakened aliens to Earth. Each would learn from the other's perspective, creating bridges of understanding that transcended species. Show them, one of the Vox 3 requested, its crystalline form pulsing with anticipation. Amanda activated the main holographic display, revealing their greatest joint achievement. A three-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, dotted with points of light representing known hive mind civilizations. The Consciousness Liberation Network, she explained to the new arrivals. A joint mission to free other species trapped in forced unity, using our combined knowledge to offer them choice. The map showed their progress. Dozens of worlds where other collective species had begun their own journeys toward balanced independence. The Vox 3 were not alone in their evolutionary path, nor in their need for guidance toward a better way. Each species finds its own balance, Jamie added, sensing pride from their alien partners. Some maintain closer mental bonds, others choose more independence, but all have the right to choose their own path. Through the facility's windows, they could see one of the most remarkable changes. Human cities now incorporated Vox 3 architecture, living crystal structures that pulsed with the combined consciousness patterns of both species, not to control or dominate, but to celebrate their shared achievement and ongoing cooperation. The first generation of human Vox 3 hybrid technology is ready for testing, Amanda announced, pulling up the designs. Neural interfaces that allow any human, neurodivergent or neurotypical, to experience different ways of perceiving reality. The technology would revolutionize human understanding of consciousness and cognition. By experiencing different mental patterns firsthand, people could develop greater empathy and appreciation for diverse ways of thinking. We have detected new signals, a Vox 3 researcher communicated through the neural link. From deep space, others like us, seeking freedom. Jamie smiled, remembering how far they'd come from those first terrifying days of invasion. Send them our message, he said. Let them know they're not alone. The combined human Vox 3 broadcast network activated, sending their story into the cosmos. Not a story of conquest or submission, but one of transformation. A testament to the power of diversity, the strength found in accepting different ways of being, and the beauty that emerges when uniformity gives way to harmony. Above them, Earth's sky had become a canvas of infinite variation. Vox 3 ships moved in patterns that celebrated their individuality while maintaining graceful coordination. Human cities pulsed with the combined consciousness of two species who had found strength in their differences. The silence that once threatened to consume humanity had given way to an endless symphony of unique voices, each contributing its own note to a universe learning to embrace the chaos of diversity. In the end, humanity hadn't just survived the alien threat, they had transformed it into the greatest breakthrough in human consciousness since the dawn of self-awareness. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, other collective species were hearing their song of freedom.